Hey guys, what's up? Booksmarts here, and today we're doing another Zero to Hero guide. This guide is for the Arms Warrior, and we'll be taking a look at talents, gear, stat prio, rotations, and playstyles for single target raid encounters, cleave raid encounters, and Mythic Plus. First up is talents. Arms Warriors have access to two trees, Slayer and Colossus. Slayer is all about enhancing the abilities that you have, while Colossus introduces a new ability, Demolish, and buffs that. Of the two, Slayer is considerably stronger in single target, and only slightly worse in AoE, so all our builds will be using Slayer's hero tree. Next, we'll be taking a look at the builds used in different scenarios, starting with single target raid encounters, mainly Sikrin and Kai Veza. As of the making of this video, the build shown on screen is the top build used in single target encounters. It's a strong build, leaning away from cleave and leaning into execute, as well as dropping some group CC in the class tree for passive bonuses. The raid cleave build, useful in any raid encounters that have more than one mob, it's actually very similar to the single target tree. In the class tree, we opt for more group damage, even taking shockwave to help with certain adds, and in the spec tree, the only change made is taking 1 point from Bloodborne and picking up cleave. Very similar build. For the Mythic Plus build, a couple changes are made again. For the class tree, we spec into more passive movement and DR. For the spec tree, we forego some of the execute buffs to instead buff synergy between the rest of our abilities, and increasing our group damage even more at a slight cost to our single target. But for the amount of group damage we can do, it's well worth it. Moving on to gear and stat prio. On screen now is a breakdown of stat priority for raid and Mythic Plus. The main point of gear is to buff our stats, so we want to take pieces that give us mainly haste and crit. And the more enemies we have around us, the more valuable haste is. Of the 4 secondary stats, versatility is the one you're looking to avoid. And always sim your character to figure out what the best items and upgrades for your character are. This season, our gear choices are pretty easy due to the power of some of the non-tier pieces, namely the neck from Sikrin, the ring from Queen, and the back from Rationin. There are also quite a few trinkets this season, some boasting crazy stat gains, while others do massive upfront damage. As Arms Warriors, our 2 best simming trinkets are Treacherous Transmitter and Avanax's Mercurial Egg. Shown on screen now is a preview of the best in slot for an Arms Warrior, both in single target and AoE, provided no items are crafted. Speaking of crafted items, let's talk about that for a minute. Craftable items have been made some of the most powerful items in the game, and combined with the right embellishments, can actually become stronger than our best options depending on what item you craft. Arms Warriors are all about weapon damage, so if you don't have a 639 weapon that you can use, your best option is a 636 crafted weapon with the Dark Moon Sigil Ascension embellishment. Your second crafted item should be for your wrist slot, the Ever-Forged Vambraces with the Writhing Armor Banding embellishment. And once you acquire a 639 weapon, your third crafted item should actually be your back slot, the Consecrated Cloak. When you do get a 639 weapon, both of your embellishments should also switch to Dusk Thread Lining. Since we're talking about embellishments, we'll also touch on gems, enchants, and consumables. Shown on screen now are the recommended enchants, consumables, and gems for an Arms Warrior. Feel free to pause here while you get your information, and we're moving on. Moving on to the playstyle and rotation. Arms Warriors have a very simple rotation, both in single target and AoE. Let's start in single target against a single enemy. We'll start with the basics, then build from there. For normal pulls, always charge in and apply Rend as your first global. Rend is your basic dot ability and lasts for 21 seconds. Arms Warriors are all about applying their bleeds, then building and spending rage to hit the target for massive damage, so you want to make sure this is always on the target. After Rend, usually your next ability is Overpower. Overpower has 2 charges with a 12-second recharge, and it can't be dodged, blocked, or parried, so it always hits if you're in range. Not only that, but it also increases the damage of your next Mortal Strike by 30%, stacking up to 60. Mortal Strike is our bread and butter ability. On a 6-second hasted cooldown, meaning the more haste you have, the shorter the cooldown gets, this ability is our main single target rage spender, and one of our most damaging abilities. You want to be using Mortal Strike on cooldown, but if you have 2 charges of Overpower, use 1 charge first. So, charge, Rend, Overpower, Mortal Strike, and from here you'll start to get procs of Overpower and Execute. Execute is only available to use when the target is below 20% health, but it does an absolute ton of damage. It is the namesake of all the execute abilities in the game, and is extremely strong. If you can press this button, there's almost never a reason not to. When you're in your rotation and you get procs of Overpower and Execute, Execute does take precedence, but again, use the second charge of Overpower before using Mortal Strike again. If you only have one stack of Overpower and Mortal Strike is on cooldown, then we use the other Overpower. If Mortal Strike and Overpower are both on cooldown, then we use Slam. Slam is our filler ability and costs 20 rage, and it fills our rotation by giving us something to press when we have nothing else to. As such, if we do have anything else to press, we should press that over Slam. And this is the most basic Arms Warrior rotation, okay? This is the first step. So far, all the abilities mentioned have been for single target, but Arms Warriors can also excel at AoE. Cleave is a talent ability that does just what it says. Cleaves all targets in front of you, and for good damage. This is our AoE rage spender, and the more targets there are, the more important Cleave becomes. And, if you have an Overpower proc, Cleave uses it up just like Mortal Strike would, to do even more damage. You want to start working it into your rotation when there's more than one target, and when there are more than 3 targets, Cleave actually starts doing more damage than Mortal Strike. This is also technically true at 2 or 3 targets, but against 2 targets, Sweeping Strikes comes in clutch. On a 30-second cooldown, Sweeping Strikes last 15 seconds and makes all your single target abilities hit a second nearby target for 3/4 of the damage done. This allows you to continue your single target rotation in 2 target cleave situations and do significantly more damage. For AoE filler, if you don't take cleave, we have Whirlwind. Whirlwind has no cooldown, costs 20 rage, and does a small amount of damage to everyone around you. It's not the strongest ability, but if you aren't in a multi-target build, it's better than nothing. Arms also has a few different niche things and pseudo cooldowns. The first thing we'll mention is our resource, Rage. A small amount of rage is generated by abilities, but the large majority of our rage generation will come from auto attacks, so you want to make sure you're always in melee range. Rage can sometimes be hard to manage with all of our abilities, but if we pay attention to our rage bar and try to stay between 60 to 80 range, we'll always have enough to continue our rotation. The difference between a good Arms Warrior and a great Arms Warrior is how well they're able to control their rage bar while doing their full rotation. The next niche thing we'll mention is Skull Splitter. On a 21-second cooldown, Skull Splitter smacks the target for good damage, and for 10 seconds our Rend and our Mastery dot ticks twice as fast. Skull Splitter is great for using at the start of our damage windows, making our dots essentially double in damage during cooldown windows. You still want to press this as often as possible for the damage it gives, but as strong as it is, it still comes in second to our Mortal Strike spam. We also mentioned our Mastery dot, so let's touch on that. With our Mastery, Deep Wounds, whenever we Mortal Strike, Cleave, Colossus Smash, or Blade Storm, we leave behind a dot on the target, dealing extra damage, but making the target take increased damage from us. And the higher our Mastery, the more damage the target takes. Since this is applied off of Mortal Strike and Cleave, it should be on all targets nearly 100% of the time. Colossus Smash, which we just mentioned, is our big pseudo cooldown, giving us a 13-second damage window every 45 seconds, where we do a flat 30% more damage to the target. We want to try to get as much damage as possible in during our Colossus windows, and you should aim to have it on the target both whenever you're in your cooldown windows and as often as possible. For AoE, Arms Warriors also have Thunderous Roar. Also on a 45-second cooldown, Thunderous Roar basically breaks the eardrums of everyone around you and makes all targets within 12 yards bleed for massive damage over 16 seconds. A very strong little damage cooldown and definitely worth pairing with others. For big cooldowns, Arms Warriors get access to 2, Avatar and Blade Storm. Avatar is on a 90-second cooldown, and when you use the ability, your character actually grows larger, breaks free from any movement impairing abilities, and does a flat 20% more damage for 20 seconds. Blade Storm is also on a 90-second cooldown, and while it's good single target damage, it's huge for AoE damage. For 5 seconds, we become immune to movement impairing and loss of control effects, and just spin around, smacking all nearby targets for really good damage. This is a really fun cooldown to use, and pairing it with our other damage amps allows us to get some absolutely insane damage going. Because Colossus Smash applies our mastery, giving us, let's say, 25% increased damage. Avatar gives us 20% increased damage, and Colossus Smash increases our damage on the target by 30%, giving us a grand total of 75% increased damage potential for our Blade Storm. So, for single target raid scenarios, the opener is Charge into Thunderous Roar, hitting Thunderous Roar when you're charging into Rend, Colossus Smash, Avatar, Blade Storm. Once Blade Storm is up, you got about 5 seconds left of increased damage, so Mortal Strike into Skull Splitter into Overpower once or twice, into hopefully another Mortal Strike before the Colossus Smash debuff wears out. From here, you'll assume your normal rotation, using cooldowns whenever you have them, and making sure you hold cooldowns to sync them up if there's less than 5 or 10 seconds. For the Cleave build, very little changes rotation-wise. Cleave replaces Whirlwind, and with 2 targets, Cleave's Prio falls under Skull Splitter but above Overpower and Slam. Keeping track of how many opponents are in range is important though. The more people around, the more damage Cleave will do, and with 5 or more targets, Cleave's Prio will actually rise above Mortal Strike. With 2 or more targets, you also want to replace Rend with Thunderclap, and you want to use sweeping strikes as often as possible, while making sure you have it for all your cooldown windows. In situations where your opener would be towards 2 or 3 people, such as Silken Court or the first boss in Mists, your opener is Charge into Thunderous Roar, into Thunderclap, into Sweeping Strikes, into Colossus Smash, into Avatar, into Blade Storm. After Blade Storm, you want to Skull Splitter into Mortal Strike, into Cleave, into Overpower, into Mortal Strike, into Cleave. And after Blade Storm, whenever you get an Execute proc, use it on your next global. For the Mythic Plus build, there will be 2 rotations, the adds and the bosses. For bosses, just follow the single target opener, and for add packs, follow the Cleave rotation. In our Mythic Plus build, we don't have Skull Splitters, so we don't have to worry about the extra button or mechanic. We can just keep piling on more damage with Cleave. For example, you charge into Thunderous Roar, into Thunderclap, into Sweeping Strikes, into Colossus Smash, into Avatar, into Blade Storm. From here, we're just keeping Mortal Strike and Cleave on cooldown, using Thunderclap to keep Rend up, and waiting on the next cooldown. The last thing I want to talk to you about are some helpful weak auras. In my time playing an Arms Warrior, keeping track of my Rage, my Bleeds, and my cooldown timers have helped me to get the most out of my warrior, and I would highly recommend getting some weak auras to help you track whatever aspects of your spec you might find it hard to keep track of. And that is my Zero to Hero Arms Warrior guide. With your newfound knowledge and skill, you should be able to take your warrior into raid and keys and smash like never before. If you enjoyed the guide, please subscribe or smash that like button, and feel free to leave a comment telling me what class or spec you want to see a guide for next. Alright everyone, I'm out. Take care.